So at the critic screening I went to, thanks so much for that, I always want to say thanks whenever I'm invited to one of those, they handed out a poster, which is, pretty normal at these kind of things, but then they also handed out Mama's Linguini candy and a cheese grater. What the hell is this movie about?
Groovy.
The Book of the Dead.
The Evil Dead Rise again, once more, for the last time, maybe, in Evil Dead Rise. Before I get my thoughts on this film, I should say what I think of the other Evil Dead movies. The original trilogy, love them like a lot of horror fans. A wonderful combination of technique and camp and comedy and scares and imagination. Absolutely love them. The remake, surprisingly enjoyed that too. Not as much as the original, but I thought it was a new spin on it while also bringing back practical effects, some good scares, some creative kills, and being pretty imaginative. So I actually really enjoyed the remake. So now we have this follow-up to that remake, which is kind of a sequel. You don't need to see the previous one in order to follow it. Like, it helps a touch, but not much. And honestly, it's pretty by the numbers. This is by no means a bad movie, but it's hard to say it's good. It's hard to say rush out and go see it because it's a film that's serviceable, but when it comes to Evil Dead, I'm expecting something new and exciting, and this has very little of both. Not to say there is no effort, no passion or anything like that in it, but when I review horror films, I do kind of raise it to a higher standard because I have seen so much of the same in horror. I want something exciting and new, and I will be honest, I raise that a little higher with Evil Dead movies as well because it is such this iconic franchise that does a lot of strange things and a lot of weird things, but a lot of things you remember and take a lot of technique and imagination and intelligence. And while that is here, it's not really pushing the boundaries. It's doing a lot more of just what you've seen in a lot of other horror films.
What's up, sis?
I had the most beautiful dream.
I dreamed there was a really good after credit sequence with Bruce Campbell.
That is just a dream.
I know. Could you at least put this in?
It's over!
Now, with that said, there are a lot of good practical effects in here. There's definitely CG as well, but I don't know. I think you have to expect a little bit of that in today's cinema. I'm not diehard against it, but I do very much appreciate when they go practical on a lot of these. Even some of these effects, I'm wondering how they did. There's one scene where a character has black ooze coming out of her nose. Well, okay, I guess they could get something up her nose, whatever, but then it starts coming out her eyes as well while they're open. And if it's CG, it's some of the best CG I've ever seen in my life because it really looks like it's just coming out of there and she touches it and smears it all over her face and stuff like that. So I'm still wondering how they did that. It's been a while since I've seen a film where I said, man, how did they do that? So that's really nice. But all the characters, all the setups, all the scares are things that are done okay, but you've seen over and over to death, and they'll stay with you enough to make you want to get through the movie, but you're not gonna really be thinking about them long afterwards. Am I the only one that thinks it's weird this song is always connected to horrific things going on? This movie does that thing where they'll have something scary at the beginning and then it'll say some amount of time earlier. And in this case, it really is pointless. I think they just did it so they could have a kind of a scarier ending, I guess, or make the ending seem more clever than it is, or maybe they just had an idea for an opening and they really want to work with that, but it's something where I feel like you didn't need to do a 1 day earlier thing with that. You could have just had it open the way it opens. It opens on this cabin in the middle of nowhere, which makes sense for Evil Dead, and then you could have that kind of make its way to our main characters, you know what I mean? So I'm not even sure why they did that. The camera work is not bad. You always look for the great cinematography in Evil Dead movies, but the problem with this one is even when they do get a pretty cool shot, it's so dark and so blurry that you start to get sick of looking at after a while. What I like about the Evil Dead movies is that when you start to get sick of looking at something for too long, like a lot of these movies will just look at one guy for a while, usually Bruce Campbell, they'll mix it up somehow. They'll throw in a different kind of monster or more cast members or maybe throw in a new kind of effect. You know, they'll change it up somehow. You're just kind of looking at the same people and the same kind of standard cinematography that's impressive but gets old really fast when they don't change it up.
Open up now.
You don't look so good, Mom.
Nothing a big old kiss from you won't fix.
Oh, yeah. Did I mention they're kind of stupid in this, too? See? On top of that, the characters' reactions off each other. That's a huge problem, in my opinion, because this is a movie trying to be much more gritty and realistic, which is fine. I'm totally okay with that. But like when characters die in this, there's not that much of a reaction to it. There's a little bit that you kind of expect in your standard horror film of someone saying, oh no, and getting a little teary-eyed, but then it kind of cuts away from it really quickly. And I feel like if you're really trying to let the dread and horror of this situation sink in, you really got to give it a little bit more time. Or if you're gonna go really big, really crazy and zany and just go for the crazy kills, you gotta go bigger, you gotta go crazier. Because again, even though the effects are impressive, I don't remember many of the kills. A lot of the characters as well are, again, not bad, just very familiar. One trope we really gotta stop, man. Now, you know me, I like to rip into something when it goes either too left or too right, you know, but there's a lot of things that don't bother me either. I don't care what they change the race or sexuality or gender of a character usually. Just write them well, that's all I really care about. But on that note, I am so sick of the angsty teen who's going to a protest. I've seen it in this, Quantumania, the royal bullshitty bullshit, whatever that was called. Don't get me wrong, I know that a lot of younger people today are much more involved in issues nowadays than they have been a long time, but you know how you see something from the 60s and they'll include like the hippie movement going on, and it's really cringy and uncomfortable.
I mean, I know this world needs help. That's why some of my generation are kind of crazy and rebels, you know?
I feel like this is what that's gonna be. Nothing says hello, fellow teens, than having a teen go to a protest like it's a lazy way of getting across, I'm about something, and it's like, yeah, you're about to get really, really annoying.
Mom?
Mommy's with the maggots now.
Gotcha. I'm still gonna open the door later. The main character, too, was not especially interesting to me, even though they do have kind of an interesting allegory set up, and that's what these new movies kind of do. I really like in the first film, they focus on the main character trying to beat her drug addiction while all this hallucinogenic shit is going on and she could easily fall to the dark side. So, I mean, that's very, very clever. Yes, it's been done before, but it was done in such a clever way. This is very much talking about a character who's about to become a mother. And I feel like I've just seen that done to death in horror films. You know, even Jurassic Park kind of dealt with that a little bit. And how old is that movie? But that's not to say you couldn't do something with it. I'm saying they don't do anything really that new here. And the main character has kind of these strange underreactions whenever somebody would die or be turned into something or climbing on the ceilings or the walls. She always looks somewhere in between confused and annoyed. She doesn't really look that terrifying. These are like her family members this is happening to, and she just doesn't really come across as that interested. A lot of the characters either play their roles just well enough or are kind of underperforming a little bit, except for one character. Alyssa Sutherland is having a ball. She's scary, she's funny, she's covered in makeup and obviously has to wear all these different wires and is crawling on the ceiling, has to do all this crazy stuff, and by God, it has to be uncomfortable, but it looks like she's having the time of her life. Like, she is just chewing the scenery, literally, in the most amazing way. And what I like about this is that, you know, she's the sister to the main character in this. If you were to show these two actresses and say, one of them's gonna be the hero and one of them's gonna be possessed by a demon, can you guess who it's gonna be? But I mean that in the most complimentary way, because by God, she knocks out of the park. She is the most memorable thing in this. And just like in the first film with the character that gets possessed first, they just absolutely steal the show. But again, in the first movie where they kind of play with that a little bit, you kind of think, without going into spoilers, you kind of think something is going to happen to the main character by the end in the first film, and it doesn't. Where in this one, everything you think is going to happen happens, and even when they try to get really creative with something, like there's a monster that's forming at the end of this movie and they give you little hints of what's about to look like in the Book of the Dead, and that's really exciting, but they don't show much of it. It's hidden too much in the dark, murky cinematography that you don't really get to enjoy it. And I feel like, again, the fun of Evil Dead is that it's hidden in the shadows, but then it shows itself in all its crazy glory, and you can just let the imagination and creativity just leap off the screen. And Instead, they still kind of keep it half hidden away, and that's not fun to me.
I'm getting us out of here. I promise.
You'd be a good mom someday, honey pie.
Oh, yeah?
You know how to lie to kids.
And how to act like things aren't a big deal when they really are a big deal, though again, I don't know if that's intentional. Even the props given to us at the screening, the Mama's linguine and the cheese grater, I never saw what the Mama's linguine was. She makes eggs. Maybe they did some chocolate-covered eggs. That would have made more sense. But the cheese grater, good God, an Evil Dead movie has a cheese grater. What are they gonna do with this? It's used on a person's leg, and that's it. And they don't even hold on for that long. That's the kind of frustration I'm talking about. In any other horror film, that'd be fine. But in Evil Dead, you gotta go further than that. But okay, I really do want to get across, the film is not bad per se. It does all the things you would expect a very run-of-the-mill Evil Dead movie to do, and that's the thing. I don't think of Evil Dead as run-of-the-mill. I do think of it as different and creative and gonna try something new, but just as the average horror film goes, it follows all the beats totally fine. It does have a decent sense of humor that still feels in that Evil Dead vein. There's a cute little homage to The Shining in this, involving an elevator and blood that I won't give away, but it's a fun little spin on the idea. It's kind of taking the idea that started with The Shining and moving it to the next level, which I think is really, really fun. But those ideas are few and far between. So yes, it's perfectly serviceable as a horror film, but I don't think it's that serviceable as an Evil Dead film. So I feel like if you're just looking for a date night movie to cling closely on, I mean, it's fine for that. It's got the jump scares. It'll keep you interested enough. If you're a completionist and just want to see all the Evil Dead movies, it's not gonna be terrible. But as something that's continuing what was admittedly a pretty decent reboot of this franchise, I don't think it's that strong a part 2. So let's give it 2.5 out of 4 flying eyeballs on a stick. It's really not bad. I just don't know if I can recommend it as an Evil Dead movie. With that said, I would love to know your thoughts on this, even if you die hard disagree with me, because Evil Dead is a very unique franchise. I would love to know the thoughts of Evil Dead fans on this movie. Do you think it's a good follow-up to the previous film? Do you think that it follows in the same tone and that does push the boundaries pretty well and is pretty smart? And also, do you think it's a good connection to the original trilogy? Do you think it's continuing the spirit of the original? Or do you think it's just killed the franchise, you're never gonna be interested in Evil Dead again? If it doesn't have Bruce Campbell, it's not Evil Dead? Or you're somewhere in between, kind of like where I am, where you go, yeah, it was fine enough, I guess, but I don't think this is gonna be seen as a cult classic. Let me know your thoughts and I'll see you next time. Take care.